For somebody as troubled as Kurt, I think it was inevitable that it would affect him very deeply indeed.
He never expected to be a megastar, and when it went ballistic, Kurt had a lot of problems dealing with it, and he had a lot of problems coming to terms with it, because he's punk rock kid on one side, but then he's megastar on the other side.
Well, Cobain was such a contradictory figure because he planned his whole fame, he planned his whole career, and part of him really thought he deserved it and wanted to enjoy it, and part of him wouldn't let him enjoy it. I think his wife Courtney was trying to get him to enjoy the trappings, you know, but when he made all this money, he bought a car, he bought a second-hand car. You know, he couldn't let it go.
I remember we were flying out to Portugal, and we met up with them, and they came to our dressing room. Kurt came right away, and we was having a chat about all kinds of things, you know, and joking and stuff, and, you know, he was being a bit cynical about, hey, you know, about being a super pop star now, you know, and all that sort of stuff. Which, in one way, didn't seem like it. I think he obviously wanted his music to get heard, and you know, what he was saying he wanted to get out there. But dealing with the other stuff, I think, you know, he had a few problems with it, really. You know, there was always that irony about it all. You know,
he worked at it, he wanted it, and then when he got it, he realized that all of the work that he put into it had been about the music, and all the other stuff that was going to suck up his time, suck up the air, you know, suck up his energy and his love for the fans that he really cared about. You know, he just wished, man, I wish I had the time to deal with that. He never got that time.
Kurt created a sound that was an amalgamation of raw punk, hard metal and pop melody, then added his own dark, brooding lyrics. Kurt had found an audience who felt his pain and related it to their own. But despite the iconic status that Kurt had reached, close friends saw a very different person.
What I liked about Kurt, I guess, a lot was his personality. He could be very funny. He would tell jokes and play jokes on people. He liked a lot of the same kind of music that I did. He liked a lot of doing the same sort of things, and he was very artistic too. He could draw really well.
Kurt was a very sort of quiet, gentle, easygoing kind of guy. Just nice guys, very low key. No rock stars.
I mean, the jokey side of things is like when some huge tour bus had turned up to pick him up from the hotel, because we'd be staying in the hotel, and we'd be leaving, he'd want to get in our bus, you know, and you know, didn't happen every day, but he'd go, I want to come with you guys and just sit at the back, you know.
He played a guitar all the time. It was just like he'd sit there and watch TV and play guitar and just kind of fiddle around with songs. Sometimes it'd be, you know, Beatles songs he'd be playing. Sometimes it'd be like little chords or notes, and other times it'd be songs that he was writing, but he just loved music, whether it was listening to it or playing it, you know, having it around.
Kurt's personality was a very soft one to me. You know, he was very quiet. You know, I mean, he rarely showed, you know, like really intense enthusiasm over anything. He just wasn't a very emotional character, you know, at least not that I ever saw.
Well, if he got his feelings hurt somewhere, you wouldn't be able to tell by looking at him. Like later on, he'd be fuming about it, or mad, or sad about how he was treated. And he tried to be, you know, he could be joke and be one of the guys and be kind of mean sometimes if he was talking to someone he don't like, but generally he would try to be more, you know, sensitive of other people's feelings too.
I think it was an archetypal indie kid in one way, disturbed because of his childhood in another way, and but very strong as well in another way, you know, powerful to deal with it. You know, if you didn't like something, I think he'd tell you, you know.
Every time you did something, he was so appreciative. The tiniest interview, the littlest mention, he was always thankful and always made a point of thanking you for your efforts, even though you'd virtually done nothing. He always appreciated it.
We've got this kind of obsessive sort of guy who was obsessed with becoming famous, with every single little detail of his career all mapped out, and loads of lists of his favourite bands and rewritten to make him look cool, and some people out, some people in, and this idea that, you know, he would map out and storyboard all of his own videos, and, you know, a complete control freak on the one hand, and on the other hand, this rather immature, it must be said, glass half empty sort of guy who kind of gloried in things not being right. He was a guy who would happily give you a quote like, you know, I don't think anybody should be looked upon as a god, or it's crap to be called a god, or whatever. On the other hand, he kind of loved it, really. He was a pretty pathetic and nasty piece of work in many ways, I think. The guy made some brilliant music, but he was a pretty crap human being.
But the key to Nirvana's success was Kurt's dark, enigmatic performances. His haunting vocals, sometimes rasping, sometimes yelling, pouring out his brooding view of the world.
That was the one thing that struck me about them, was his particular ear for melody. He would have these strange guitar riffs, but then he would have a vocal melody that was completely different, that seemed to interlock with the guitar riffs in a totally bizarre way. And of course now, in retrospect, you look at Nevermind and it's got all these amazing vocal melodies on it.
There are certain people within music who have tremendous voices, and they have voices with an emotional timbre to them that are unique. And Kurt Cobain is one of those talents.
One of the first things that I remember hearing in Nirvana's music that just stopped me in my tracks was the way that Kurt's voice could just sort of move from this like quite mellow sort of mumble almost to this desperate cry. And it wasn't in any way affected in any way, I don't think. It sounded, you believe that this guy was sort of, you know, screaming from his very soul.
You could hear pain in his voice. You could hear the pain, which was so obvious in his voice, and I think that's why so many people identified with him.
His musical talent is probably goes a bit unnoticed because of his fame in some ways, but I mean, he had a fantastic voice. I mean, you know, he could bellow it out, and people can shout on records and stuff like that. But his kind of shouting was like, it was like this volcanoes, this explosion of pain, and it sounded great as well. It wasn't just somebody with a rock voice. It was like this rock voice that was like quite emotional pain, and it sounded fantastic. You know, it was like he ripped his heart open and said, have some of this, have a look at this, you know, see what this is like, you know.
Personal things in it, but for the most part, it's just, it's very unpersonal, you know, impersonal, you know, and I think that'll be a surprise to a lot of people.
I think Kurt Cobain deserves his reputation as a great artist, great rock star, because he had a very direct and brutal way of communicating. So these were pop songs about anti-pop kind of things. So it was quite subversive and very, very exciting.
How did Kurt deal with being a rock star? Drugs.
At the tender age of 7, Kurt was prescribed the drug Ritalin to try to counteract his hyperactivity. Whilst the treatment only lasted a few months, it seemed to balance his mind. By the time he shot up heroin for the first time in 1986, Kurt was plagued by constant chronic stomach pain and the onset of manic depression.
I was in pain. I mean, I was in pain for so long that I didn't care if I was in a band. I didn't care if I was alive, you know. And it just so happened that I came to that conclusion at a time when my band became really popular, you know. I mean, it had been going on and building up for so many years that I was, you know, suicidal. I mean, I just didn't want to live. So I just thought, if I'm gonna die, if I'm gonna kill myself, I should take some drugs, you know. May as well become a junkie, because I felt like a junkie every day, you know.
He discovered that heroin was the ultimate security blanket. He got himself into the mindset that drugs could fix his problems.
The first prescription drug he was really given was Ritalin, because he was hyperactive at the time, they thought. And there is quite a bit of medical literature debating whether it's a positive thing to give kids at that point. Many people find that it helps calm kids down, but there are others who argue that by letting kids think that drugs can affect their